ברוכים הבאים וברוכות הבאות. Maybe really the most important thing that I want to say is what an honor it is to have you with us. That was mamash not clear that any of this would happen. I want to say that I'm honored to speak with you in person because I think there was that moment when we all gave up that it's not going to happen. So mamash a delight. And I also think that for people that haven't been here for a while, some of you have, but for people that haven't been here for a year or two, yeah, it is very special to be here. It might be heartbreaking and it might be heart-opening, and sometimes both of them come together. And Beit, if we open the eyes of our eyes and the hearts of our hearts, and just to take in everything, the horror and the life and the chesed and the worry and the blood, and it's all happening at the same time. So באמת ברוכים הבאים, and also ברוכים הבאים לחברינו מהארץ, שזה די כיף שאתם נמצאים פה, מכל מיני מקומות. אז אני רוצה, I want to start with י"ז בתמוז. I want to say something about י"ז בתמוז. קודם כל, I'm sure it's not a big day in America, בטח not in the more liberal denominations. And something happened to me yesterday that כאילו, suddenly I had this insight. I was looking at Mishnah Ta'anit, right? Mishnah Ta'anit is where we get the list of the things that happened on י"ז בתמוז, נכון? And it says there, ב-17 בתמוז נשתברו הלוחות, כן, הלוחות הראשונים. Moses comes down from the mountain and breaks, לך רד, and he breaks the לוחות, and בטל התמיד, right, the daily offering in the Mikdash. זהו, it was, that was the end of that. It was the end of the daily offering. It was nullified. And שרף הפסטמוס את התורה, which is a horrific story, and העמיד צלם בהיכל. I'm not going to talk about those, but I want to speak about בטל התמיד. I never ever thought about it this way, but I've never been in times like this, and the things that are happening in the world have never happened to me. So we're allowed to have Torah speak to us in new ways. But the story of Bitul HaTamid is a pretty horrific story out of the stories of sex and violence of the Hasmonean kings. You know, it's like you can't make it up. It's so bad. Aval, the story is that the two children of Queen Shlomtzion and Alexander Yanai, the Hasmonean kings, Yochanan and Aristobulus, when their mother died, started a war. Who's gonna, regular stuff. We know that story. But in the war that ensued between them, Yochanan Horkenus was also a Kohen Gadol, just to make you feel what corruption feels like. Okay, he wants to be a king, and he's a Kohen Gadol, and he's fighting against his brother. His brother, Aristobulus, finds refuge in the city, and the forces of Yochanan, this is all Jews against Jews. It's also the regular sport, but it's just in a horrific setting. So the kochot, the forces of Yochanan, the Kohen, are outside. Aristobulus is inside. And then the story in Masechet Menachot in the Bavli says that a guy that knows Greek philosophy or Greek lore or whatever we want to call it, wisdom, comes and says to the people that are outside, listen, as long as they're offering the tamid, there's no chance you're going to get, you're not going to be able to break into the mikdash. And then, in the story of how they continued offering the steady, daily offerings of the tamid, it says that out of the lishka of the kesef, for the korbanot, for the sacrifices in the mikdash, every day they would take out the money for 2 kvasim. They would down the wall, up come the sheep, and we have a tamid. But when Yochanan Orkenus heard that, he said, okay, so we have to stop this, because, here the war of Jews against Jews. I want to get in. So the next day, they sent down the money, pishki, and they drew up a pig. And letaer, as we say, and letaer. It's like, okay, and the story has been made that this big animal, right? It's like anathema, right? It's like putting tzilim b'echal, sticks its claws into the wall, and all of the land of Israel goes through like a tremor like an earthquake. איזה סיפור? לא יאומן. איזה סיפורים? למה לא עושים איזה סרטים? אבל, it's like, okay, so, and the end of that piece in Menachot is, and we're talking about the year 60 BC. Okay? עוד לא, the Mikdash is not at all נחרב yet. Jesus hasn't come up yet. But it says that's the beginning of the destruction, kilu. There's all the time, you can see in rabbinic traditions, they're all the time trying to go back. It's like, because in trying to understand, which I think all of us are trying to do as well, to understand the disintegration of society that we're also experiencing in a very severe way, with all the power that we're trying to bring towards doing something about it. But it's very clear that one of the modes that the rabbis use all the time is to say, no, it started here, no, it started here, no, it started here. Actually, maybe with Avraham. Oh, maybe it started in the garden with the snake. Aval, it makes sense to think that way, mythically for sure. But so the story of Bitul HaTamid is a story of the disintegration of anything. The unbelievable happens from the point of view of mutual tension and hatred within the Hellenistic Jewish population. All that's for Menachot and for, the general stuff. But I thought yesterday morning, wow, Melila, Batal HaTamid, the always is gone. It never crossed my mind to even think of it that way. But I thought that in the past 2 years, everything that had, or that I attributed stability to, right? That thing that keeps us going, right? There's some things that are there and they're there to stay. And the ability to speak with different groups, the country, Zionism, the world, humanity, whatever we want to see it. Batal legamri, I must say. It's batal. It doesn't mean that something new isn't going to come, but batal tamid, that alwaysness. And I think that with the exhausted muscle of our hearts, that like an aperture that just opens and closes with such crazy speed, that is a certain state of Batal Tamid. And I think that that's an experience that we as Israelis have, but I think not less than that. It is very relevant for our friends and betach for clergy in the world, and especially in North America. Well, that's the kind of music that a Beit Midrash should have. So, Rega Chevre, we're back. Just turn back. I know that you haven't finished your conversations. And I want to say that there was a beautiful, paradoxical discrepancy between things that you said, which I'm sure some of them are very, very tearful, and the smiles on your faces of just being happy to be talking and being in. So I think it's also true. We have to notice that that's also a reality that we're in. So when all kinds of things that we were sure that are there for Tamid, you know, that they're there forever and that they're stable, when all that's gone, I think it's a time that we have to listen to people that think out of the box. And I think when I think of that, I think first and foremost of Rabbi Nachman, because I think that the Torah, that creative genius managed to bring out of his amazing psyche, actually, I don't even understand how anybody understood him then, because it seems clear that he's talking to us. But in Sichot Haran, which is the collection that Rabbi Nachman's disciple, collected and edited, okay? Sichot Haran is the conversations that disciples had with their master, with Rabbi Nachman. And in the first page of your texts here of the source book, you have the following. It says, "Uve'emet da ki kol ha'olam kulo bechinat galgal chozer shekorin dreidel sevivon." Sevivon. והכל חוזר חלילה. Right? In truth, the world is a rotating wheel. And it's like a dreidel, where everything revolves. A person becomes an angel becomes a person. He says, נתהפך מאדם למלאך, ממלאך לאדם, מראש לרגל, מרגל לראש, וכל שאר הדברים שבעולם, כולם חוזרים חלילה ומתגלגלים ומתהפכים, מזה לזה ומזה לזה, מעליון לתחתון ומתחתון לעליון. Head becomes foot and foot becomes head, and everything goes in cycles and revolves and alternates. All things interchange. And he's not just talking about the wheel of samsara, he's talking about reality from his point of view. This is a Torah for Hanukkah. It is the wildest Torah for Hanukkah ever, bemet. And that happens. What is high is going to be low. What is low is going to be high. Things are going to totally change. Things that were revered and hallowed are going to be, ridiculed, and the opposite. And I think there's something very amazing that he doesn't give them the nechama, the comfort of stability, right? Come to me. No. Rabbi Nachman is like, this is reality. We are spinning like Dorothy. We are spinning all the time. And I think it's a big question. By the way, the Torah itself, which is kind of complicated, but I'll just say, because I think it's fun to know, the Torah itself is a farce on Aristotelian philosophy, but in such a whimsical, creative way that it's lo yuman. But it's a real question that if we're just sitting on, one of the sides of the svivon as it's spinning around, Be'emet, what we're asking for is a moment where we can just be still for a moment and, just have stability for a few hours or for a day or for, and so I want to bring Rabbi Nachman in the beginning to say that's reality. That's what's happening. We're in the middle of a very big spin, and there's a lot of vertigo that goes with it. And when that happens, it's very clear that we have to find an inner balance or an inner anchor, because it's not going to be outside. The outside is just turning. So that the question is, on what can we stabilize our inner world that we can find some kind of clarity. So I chose for the theme of today's Beit Midrash to speak about the balancing of Middot and to see how the very, very rich Jewish language offers us ideas about this question of balance. And I'm saying it, in the beginning when we were planning this summer, the idea was that each teacher would take a midah, would take a quality and speak about how that quality or that, that trait or characteristic can be a hindrance, like a meni'ah for our spiritual leadership. So I said, okay, but I want to do the unity. I want to do the balance, because I feel that we're living in a social and political reality that sometimes puts a huge stress on one value, right? What we would talk if we were from Beitar, chadness, right? One flag with one, we're the justice people, we're the peace people, we're the life people, we're the bitachon people. It's like, that's on the one hand, I'm noticing that as an observer and as a participant in this society. And also that we're seeing this incredible tension that is actually being fed all the time, right? Of turning polarities into mutually exclusive qualities. That the question isn't the way they can be together, or what is the way that they can dance, but it's as if it's either this or it's that, and which tears Bemet, and we see it all around us. And I thought to myself that the greatest shiur that I got from Kabbalah and from Zohar in many ways is that their interest is never only on a certain quality for what it is. It's interesting to talk about chesed. What is chesed? How is chesed? The names of chesed. How does it manifest? Right? And what is din and what is gevurah and how does it work? But really, really what interests them is that after we've understood what it's about, what interests them is the relationship. The relationship, the axis, the flow, the river, the thing that connects, the relationship between the upper and the lower and the left and the right and the masculine and the feminine and the fire and the water. That's how can we envision, or how can we be co-creators in a reality in which different midot are working together in a specific system. That is what is called in the language of the Zohar hitkalelut, right? Hitkalelut, le'itkalela, le'itkalela da bezda, right? To integrate, to bring together, lichlol, le'itkalela da bezda. And so our theme is going to be that itkalela, and the way it creates creative and like what does it do, and where do we find ourselves with this whole question? And I think it's something that I could use, that we all could use, that people that are with you could use. And I chose texts that I think are less easy to get to, because I want you to take them and give them to other people. It's very simple. So we're going to be studying mostly texts out of the Zohar, and I'm delighted to bring them if there are people that haven't met them. You know, it's kind of the world that I live in, and I love it very, very, very much. So let me say something about what we're going to be doing in chevruta for an hour, okay? I just wanted to remind you that it might be, for some people, too hot, even though it looks like it's shady, but it might be. So just check it out, like when are you falling asleep? Okay. So what we're going to do in the reading, just let's look at the we're going to be starting with page number 1, and one of my favorite, it's the entering of the Idra Rabbah. It's the call, the great call of the teacher, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the call for the students, for the disciples, for the mystics, to come and convene in a convention, in an emergency convention. We'll talk about that later. But what I want us to notice, or what I want you to notice, is what are the ways, you can write this down because I didn't write down the questions, but what are the ways that you would give language in your world to the reason, to the problem that brings Rabbi Shimon to convene all his students, right? He says, how long shall we be sitting in an existence of one pillar, or in an existence that is based on one basis, on one Eden, on one base? So read the whole, I just wrote a small piece, right? It's the first few lines of the Idra Rabbah. The Idra Rabbah is regarded as the most sacred story in the Zohar, right? It's a grand, grand story. We'll talk about it later. But I want us to look at two questions. What is the problem of a reality that rests on one pillar? Nachon? He doesn't explain it. That's just the call, the great call. And the second question for us to look at is this call for convening, that in times of emergency, the people that have the heart for it need to convene. And I want us to look at it in the language of Hillel HaZaken, because I think that's what a lot of the opening of the Idra rests on. That's on page number 2. Okay? It has different parallels, but I brought the one from Brachot. Okay. Then the next text I want you to read, these are all small texts. Then the next text is the opening of the Sifra Tzniuta. Sifra Tzniuta is a very cryptic, dense, enigmatic text in the Zohar, the book of secrets, or the secreted book, or the book of mysteries. And this text speaks about the concept of balance. Okay, the balance, or the, איך אומרים מאזניים? Scales, the balance. So look at this image of the cosmic primordial scale. And I think our main text is going to be the text that appears on page number 3, all the way to page number 5 in the Hebrew, and then you have it in English. And that is the Idra Zuta. The Idra Rabbah is read ritually on Shavuot as part of Tikkun Shavuot. I also wrote a book about it, and the Idra Zuta, maybe I'll also write a book about it, but the Idra Zuta is the story that we read, the Zohar story we read in Lag BaOmer, and it's the story that tells of the last day before Rabbi Shimon leaves his mortal coil and what happens in that day. It's a very dramatic story because he convenes all his students saying that he wishes to say things that he could not say until now. Okay, he says, I cannot move into the next world or into the next reality before I have found a way to disclose these things for you. And it's very interesting that I don't think he's speaking about things that he knew and he kept inside, but I think it's saying they're now clear to me, and now that they're clear to me, I'm gonna give them to you, to the students. And the students are all the ones that were with him in the Idra Rabbah, in the Great Assembly, which is your first text. And this is the Idra Zuta, the small assembly, which is the last text. So read it. I want to also say we're reading it in Danny Matt's beautiful translation. I didn't bring too many of the footnotes, but if you read it in Danny Matt's translations, it's replete with wonderful, wonderful directions in which you can take the text, and that's going to be the centerpiece. The things that come after that are segments of the story of Rabbi Nachman Maaseh Bebal Tfilah. I had the great pleasure of studying it with some of the people here for quite a few days, but I don't think we have time to go through all of Maaseh Bebal Tfilah. I will relate to it when I come back, and you can have it for bedtime reading because it's stories to keep you up, right? Stories to wake you up. As Rabbi Nachman said, bedtime stories to wake you up. They're really, really consciousness awakening stories, and this one is one of the best. But I edited it down to the questions that interest me about the balancing of Middot. And if you have time, no, you might have time because we're skipping Rabbi Nachman as a reading part. On page number 13, I put two small texts that I call mystical ethics. Okay? One is out of Zohar on the Parashat of Bereshit, and one is on Zohar in Parashat Ki Tisa. So, and I really hope that we have time to really look into them. They're very, very interesting about this question of acknowledging the different qualities and midot and characteristic in the intrapersonal world, in the divine world, and understanding that our role is to bring them into a dynamic relationship with each other, okay? So, yalla, בואו נצא ללמוד, and we'll be back here at, yalla, maybe 5 to 5, or 5, yeah, 5 o'clock ממש will start. דבר ראשון, I want to thank people for jumping into waters that are very, not familiar. I don't think that's a thing we do regularly. For some people, it's very threatening. For some people, it just catches them clueless, like, what the hell's going on? Like, as some chevruta hears, what is this? what is this? אבל קודם כל, so I want to say thank you. I think that's one of the ways that we learn, is that we're, נכון, גם סיגלית. One of the ways that we learn, I think, if we want to open ourselves up to different strata, different layers of thinking and perceiving and understanding, different ways that Jews understood the world, one of the things that we have to be willing to do is feel that sense of unfamiliarity. Okay, I don't know this, but if I'm going to do it more, then I'll slowly figure out what are they talking about and why are they talking about it in this way. This is not a class I'm not going to give an introduction to Zohar, but I think it is an invitation to, first of all, open the eyes of imagination, because these are very, very, very visual texts, okay? And visual texts, for some people, people that have strong visual perception, there's no problem. That's how they see. That's how I see, right? My imagination, first of all, is visual. I see the images. That doesn't at all exclude the fact that we're talking about a text written by people that, Maimonides has been there, done that for them. They know, they've read, they've done the Moreh, they know all the trends, all the bon ton trends of the 13th century, they know them. So it's also, that's one thing. And another thing that's very interesting is to remember that when we're looking at a piece of art, and Zohar is art, or an art form, we can't ask just, why did they do it? First of all, because that's what came out. That's what they did. This is what came out of their coming together, okay, or of this group. This is what came out. So what is very interesting is the way it has impacted on the Jewish language, on Jewish imagination, on generations of Kabbalistic thought, and till today. So that's an interesting thing. But I want to jump right into the opening of the Idra. And it is one of the most dramatic openings of a story in the Zohar. Generally, the stories in the Zohar start very casually, right? One day, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yossi were walking on the way. That's the regular Zoharic story. But here, it's something very different. It's the great call of the teacher doing the emergency call to convene the people. And Nachon, I said, let's look at that. What a fascinating thing to open a grand story with a question, not with a statement, with a question. Ad eimat native b'kaima dechad zamcha. How long are we going to go on like this, right? Or, as I said in the chevrutas that I was sitting with, we can understand what might it mean to be sitting in a world that is balanced on one pillar. We can see it in all kinds of different ways. It depends on what's our immediate images. Are we thinking, Tosefta, Mishnah, like how do we think? And that's how many of these ideas are going to come up to us. But one thing is very clear, that Rabbi Shimon is saying, we cannot go on like this. It can also mean I can't go on like this, which I think he is also saying about himself, because clearly one of the ways of reading this is that he's speaking about himself. He's saying, Chevre, I can't go on like this. Al amud echad ha'olam omed v'tzadik shmo. There's one pillar. The pillar is called the righteous one. And Rabbi Shimon's saying, might be me. I can't stand doing this alone anymore. So I just want to say that the Idra Rabbah is an initiation, a great story of initiation of the disciples, of the students of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, to turn from being Adanim, which I don't know how you say in English, the sockets of the pillar. How do you say that? Like the base, Eden, to become pillars, okay? Because it's very clear, from Torah, from Mishlei onwards, that you need at least 7 pillars to hold up the world, right? We need the idea that we need different pillars, and the pillars might be also kind of containing a different quality. It's needed in order to sustain the world. Now, there's many meanings that were given throughout history of hermeneutics and interpretation, of saying what is this great tunya, what is this great problem? It can mean how long can we go on with one image of God? How long can we go on with one theology that is narrow? How long can we go on with Bichlal, the idea of something that isn't in relationship with something else, right? And that's the theme of what we're talking about. What is the problem of the one, right? We say we're monotheistic. It's about the lone God or the lonely God or the alone God. But the question is, in their mindset of the Kabbalists, it's why is there need for something more than the one? Yeah, if we're talking about reality. If we're talking about divinity unto itself and the endless, infinite ocean of divinity, we don't need anything else. That's just the great oneness. Nachon? But if we want some kind of balance, balance is not attained by the one. Balance is attained minimum by the two. Okay, that's why, that's the two. That's the scales, right? That's the scale that we're talking to. But I want to bring another thing about the pticha. כן. שיש pillar, נכון? That was Natalie from Kfar Vadim. So the other thing that's very interesting about the opening, which is very dramatic, of course, is that Rabbi Shimon quotes the groundbreaking verse, right, or the law-breaking verse, "Et lasot l'Adonai heferu toratecha." Or maybe I'll say the four things that are happening in this tiny, very dense little opening of the story. But we have the question of the teacher saying we can't go on. It's a rhetoric question. Of course we can't go on. We have to do something about it. And I think the second thing is, Et la'asot l'Adonai heferu toratecha. It is time to do for Yud Hei Vav Hei. We don't know yet what it means here. And then Rabbi Shimon kind of riffs on the Mishnah, saying, we don't have a lot of time. Mari dechova dochek. There's a lot of forces up against us, and there are so few people that are willing to do the work of working in the sacred field of the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is the sacred field. She is the Chakal. And there's very few. It's not a mass movement. Those people are standing b'shulei karma. They're not at the center. They're standing at the edges of the vineyard, right? The vineyard can mean all kinds of things for you. The vineyard, if we're Jews, the vineyard can mean Song of Songs. The vineyard can mean Yavne, of course, Yavne, Kerem b'Yavne. It can mean all kinds of things. But he's saying there are very few mechatzei chakla, very few reapers of the field that know how to work with this. And because of that they're few and that we are now so disoriented. We do not know where we're going, which sounds like us, okay? It doesn't start with a sense of clarity, of tokif, of like certainty. It says we are few, we are not clear about where to go to and how to go about what we need to do, but we have to get together. We have to convene. And not only do we have to convene with everything that is us, everything. Our coats of mail, our ideas, our physicality, our dreams, our fantasies, everything has to come to the Idra, right? He says, you have to come. On the one hand, Nachon, it's described as this very medieval Spanish call for the knights of the Shekhinah, right? Or the order. Nachon, he's calling them as one would call in the order of knights. Come in with your mail, right? Come in. You are we are going to start an order in a certain way, but it's a Yiddish order. So it's so it says, come with your tongue. Those are going to be also come with your tongue, with your thoughts, come with your body. Come in whatever way you are. Bring it all, because we will need it all to do what we're supposed to do. I'm not going to get into what they're going to do. That's for another session. But it is clear that he's saying we have to convene. We have to lehitkanes. We have to create a knesset. We have to create a Beit Knesset or a Beit Idra. And do it we must. Okay, that's what he's saying, Rabbi Shimon. So when he says, Et lasot l'Adonai, nachon, he's saying, I want to quote the verse that's going to give me the legitimacy that in whatever we're going to be doing in this circle of disciples, it's not going to be according to halakha. We are going to break. We're going to break. אנחנו הולכים להפר את התורה. We are going to break the orderly, the normative way of doing things, because there is a great danger that the most sublime Torah of oneness is about to disappear from our consciousness. And if it disappears, woe to us, woe to the world, woe to human consciousness, woe to Judaism. So, that's going to be the reason that he convenes. But I wanted to bring the opening of the Idra Rabbah in the beginning, because it is the most formative text about saying that when things are really bad, and when things are really bad, we have to come together. We have to come together. And we have to come together, not many people, we have to come together, people that are of the same heart. We have to come together to fast. We have to come together to pray. We have to come together to decide on the steps that we're going to do. We have to get strength from each other. We have to get ideas from each other. We have to get inspiration from each other. And then we can take it, right? Then we can take it. So I think that what Hillel HaZaken is saying in the back of what Rabbi Shimon is saying, and it's clear that he's quoting him, is that when Torah Chaviva al Israel, when everything's fine, we don't need to convene. Go do your thing, go do your innovation, go do the Jewishness, everything's fine. But when Torah lo Chaviva al Israel, when there is a time of that we've lost something about the relationship to Torah, that can be in a wide-angled meaning of it, we have to knos. We have to get together. And that's what the Chachamim do in Yavne, right? In the Kerem b'Yavne, right? Where they get in and one of them says, Atida Torah leishakach miYisrael. So what are we going to do? We're going to get together. We're going to get together. Even though Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Kerem b'Yavne says, Chas v'shalom shetishakach Torah miYisrael. Certain things are going to be forgotten. But no, the Torah will stay. But the Chachamim, what do? They say, if we want to get past this crisis that we're in, and they were in a big crisis, my friends. It's not just that Batala Tamid. There's no Mikdash. There's no technology of sacrifice. It's all gone. There's so much death. There's so much decimation. There's so much blood. There's so much, loss of heart. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We've lost our access. We've lost our way of connect. So we have to convene. And that's why I think Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is my greatest hero of all of Judaism, right? To say, this is what we do. We're going to get together. So I wanted to bring that as an opening of an image that really has to do a lot also with where we're at. And I think we need to find different ways to convene, and not each one to be sitting in their own little part of the field, right? זה כל כך יפה להגיד, we're in a field. This is our field. And it's very lonely to be alone. It's very lonely, and I'm sure many of you have experienced that in these last years. And there's a huge need. I mean, from that point of view, it's so nice to see rabbis coming together, and any kind of organizations that bring rabbis together. I think it's pikuach nefesh, basically. It just has to be done because we need it. But I want to say that the courage to say that in times of dire bitul tamid, right? In a time where so much has been lost, we have to take that verse that says we need to take courage from the verse Et lasot ladonai eferu toratecha, in the way it is used in Talmud, in the way it is used by Maimonides in Mishneh Torah, and the way it's used by Maimonides in the opening of Moreh Nevuchim. But it's saying there are certain moments where the breaking of Torah is the fulfilling of Torah, not from the point of view of mitzvah ba be'avera. It's not, let's transgress, because there's a transgression that is, it has a different flavor, okay? It means we have to go beyond the regular way we do things, because there is something of greater importance which is at stake. And I think that's a statement. In the case of the Idra Rabbah, for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, or for the authors of the Zohar, it is the strong feeling that Judaism is going to crash. It's just going to become so much about, the minutiae of law, and about tameh tahor, asur mutar, right? It's going to be so much about that we're going to lose connection to God, which was a huge fear, not for all Jews. There have been many Jews that have said, like God says, "Alevai va'oti azavu v'torati shamaru." It's fine. We do halacha, we do Torah, we're trying to learn how to do society. We're not doing the God thing. But the people that wrote the Zohar were not in that mindset. They were in a feeling that we are slowly losing what they have a kisufa for, what they have this great passion for, and the great yearning for, which is to feel a connection to a living presence of divinity. I mean, why are we here? This is what it's about. And because of that, he's saying, we have to do the Et Lasot Ladonai. And by the way, the reading of Et Lasot Ladonai in the Zohar is very, very radical, because it also means it is time to make God, right? It is time to make an image, a likeness, a language about God, right? Because it is gone. We're losing it from, we're not doing a molten image, we're not doing a egel, we have to find more language, more imagination, that we can connect to God in different ways. And that's what the Idra is going to do. I'm not going to go into that. But I want to say that's the first thing, is let us convene. Let us get together. Let us create a Knesset Israel. And I want to mention here the most moving call of this kind, which is Hillel Zeitlin's call after the First World War, first to say we have to ulu lebei idra. He wrote it in Aramaic. Not very good marketing. Oh my God. Why did he write it in Yiddish? But he did it. He wrote it in Aramaic. But he says, I can't say it in any other language because this is the language of calling the convention. The Jewish, for him, right, in Warsaw, in the city, for him in that Yiddish melucha of his, when you want to say, we have to get together, we have to do something about the world. He says, I need people who have the type of heart that are willing to come and pray for the world. The world is going into the long dark. And we have to get together. And so I just want to say, I think it's also a very important call in where we are to figure out how to say, Ulu Chevraya. Ulu Chevraya, we have to get together to do this because we need everybody's strength. We need everybody's strength so that we can lead the communities, so that we can uphold our different values, so that the different values will be in some kind of relationship. So that's the Ida Rabbah, and of course, he's taking also the Eferu Toratecha from that piece in Brachot, that appears also in other places, about notice what is happening with Torah in your generation. And if you see that there is a need, come together. So I'm leaving that to you. I think we all have to figure out who do we want to get together with and how. The other... Yeah, but it's not like, let's hang out and get high. It's a no, I like Farbrengens. I'm saying this is a very, very faithful moment of convening Bemet, but the Hasidic Farbrengen is from this, right? Where are they taking it from? They're taking it from this. They're saying, we come together and we're gonna use the energy, the creative energy of all the people here so that we can invoke divinity. We can bring it into our reality. Thank you. So the Sifra Detzniuta, I really brought more for the image. It's such a strange, and it's like just beyond the threshold of our waking state, kind of, right? Because this image of this scale that is standing in the air, and yet that's the place of the scale. The idea of balance is there before there was something to put in the scales, right? This scale is going to be a scale, right? It's, by the way, you can see that it's in rhyme, nachon? Sifra de tzniuta, sifra de shakil b'mitkela, de ad lahavi mitkela, lahavu mashtichin adpin be'anpin, right? And this mitkala is standing in the air, and in it is everything that was, everything that will be, and every idea that even will never happen. Everything's in the cosmic scales, which is not good and bad. It's the scales of balance. So in the opening of this very enigmatic text, it says, until there was a mitkala, until there was the idea of a scale, the two scales of the scale, there was no ability to be face to face. There is no relationship if there are not two. Okay? If there is only one pillar, a pillar doesn't have a relationship if it's all alone. It can have a conversation with itself, but it doesn't, it's alone. And the question is, what will create a reality? This is what the Sifra Detzniuta is saying, in which there will be the sustainability that comes about from the fact that there is relationship, right? It's the relationship which is both tight It's about attraction and tightness and polarity together. Without that, you cannot create anything that's sustainable. We need apin be'apin. We need the ability of the difference to be face-to-face, not the similar, the different, to be in a relationship of face-to-face. And that's why they're quoting here the great myth of the kings of Edom and why they died, because they were each one. Ana emloch, ana emloch. They were the kings that only ruled without relationship. And they also didn't have the feminine counterpart. I'm not getting into that. But I want us to see that it is seen as something totally primordial. The setting of the stage of what will be necessitates the idea of balance, okay? And now, Birshutchem, I want to talk about the Sifra de Tzniuta. Sifra Idrazuta. And if there are questions, if people have any questions, you can bring them up later after the class. We can look at certain things. Some things will be opened here, but I think if you can, if we can stay awake, kol hakavod lanu. Tov. So let's just breathe in once and fill ourselves with oxygen. And I want to say something about this Idrazuta bit. Idrazuta is very dramatic because it is the last day. And it's about the fact that Rabbi Shimon says, I know it's my last day, which I wish we would know. Most of us don't. But when is it that it is our last day? And he says, this is my day, right? Leah Goldberg has a very famous poem about that. She says, tomorrow you're all going to fight about, who's going to inherit me. But today, I make the decisions. I'm still here. And Rabbi Shimon says, today is my day. So today is not going to be open class. Everybody's going to talk. And today I'm going to talk and you're going to write. Or I'm going to talk, you're going to think. Or just be here with me. And I need to say all these things that have been in my heart. But what does he choose to say? Nachon? He brings to them a very mystical teaching, which is very beautiful and would work in any religion, in the mysticism of almost any religion, which speaks about divinity as light. Nachon? And he says, I am noticing, ani ro'eh, I am noticing that everything is coming from one light. Right? There's one light, the lamps are many, the qualities are many, the things that come out, but what is in them is the light of the source, the light of the source. And therefore, when we're thinking of the way we experience divinity in the world, as beauty, as grace, as horror, whatever ways that we do it, they cannot be separated from each other because they are all part and they're all partaking in the light of the source. That's a very deep teaching on his deathbed, to say, remember that. It's all connected to the one. Nachon? Nora chashuv. I think that's a... So they're not nifrad. Don't separate. Don't separate the different midot. Don't separate them. They're all different hues of the same light. And because he says, Hu echad u'shmo echad. It's that oneness, that the name of God is oneness, but the name, which is all the different attributes of God, Chanun, Rachum, Erech Apayim, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, whatever language you would use it in your, in your theologies, it's saying here, they all are the Shem HaGadol. These are the Shem. And then comes his great teaching that he chooses to speak about before he dies. I love teaching this because I love teaching this to activists. I love activists, and I'm in my types of activism very much. But I've noticed that it's a very important Torah for activists because it is the great, great critique of tzedek. And it is not a critique of tzedek on the fact of what is tzedek. Ma pitom, tzedek is a most sacred quality, right? Tzedek u'mishpat mechon kiso. Tzedek is, you can't have bichlal an idea of divinity in the Hebrew kind of imagination without tzedek. You have to have tzedek. But, nachon, what does Rabbi Shimon say here? He's saying, let's look at page number 4. I just want to look at that for a moment. He says, there are 2 great nerot, 2 great lights, 2 great candles that are the beauty that adorn the throne of divinity. And they are called tzedek and mishpat. By the way, it was so difficult for Matt, to decide how to translate tzedek and how to translate mishpat באנגלית, כי זה קשה. Justice is going to go, you see that, you saw that in the translation. Okay. So he says, without them, we don't have the emunah. They hold up the throne, okay? Tzedek u'mishpat. But when dinim, when judgment are awakened through mishpat, which I think Danny calls justice, נכון? And tzedek he calls righteousness. לא בדיוק, אבל that's his decision. I didn't want to, I'm not going to get into that. אבל he's saying that mishpat is a masculine attribute of the divine. And when judgment comes through it, okay? When judgment comes through the midah of tiferet, it comes through filled with compassion. We need din in this world. The world cannot exist for 1 second without boundary, without law, without din, right? Those are the first midrashim that we have, is that God tried to create the world this way. With only chesed, it would not withstand. Only with din, of course, it would not withstand. And there had to be, right, the mingling of the mingling of the 2 midot, which are expressed, if we're speaking about our theme today, in a very beautiful kind of analog imagination, where it says it's like a person that has tall glasses, right? Tall glasses. If he pours boiling water into them, they're going to crash like that. And if he's going to pour frozen water into them, they're going to implode. So you can't create the world not with chesed, not with din. You have to pour something that the glass can hold. That's sustainable. And that's how the world is created. That's the tzedek and the mishpat, and that's the chesed and the rachamim. So Rabbi Shimon here says, when judgment comes down through mishpat, it's full of rachamim. And when that happens, and it has to meet the fiery shakti, power of righteousness, of tzedek, it sweetens tzedek. It sweetens tzedek. Now, I want to say something about tzedek. Tzedek is one of the many, many, many names of the Shekhinah. Okay? Because in the Zoharic worldview, the feminine aspect of the divine, is not a Disney version of, it's not something sweet. It's not something out of a 50s movie, right? What? Yeah. And because of that, we have to understand that one of the great attributes, one of the great manifestations of the feminine in the world is called tzedek. Tzedek. She is tzedek. She comes down. She's the presence of tzedek, divine tzedek in the world. But it says here in a very beautiful way, if they come down together, tzedek and mishpat, and they can be in a relationship of love towards each other between the watery, masculine mishpat and the fiery, feminine tzedek. She comes with fire. It's very powerful. Then there is a thing called, this is the language that they love, bisum. Bisum. Bisum is a very interesting word because it sounds like something very slight and light, but there is an aromatization of tzedek. So I want to first of all offer that and say, what an interesting idea. Tzedek is very, very important. But tzedek needs to be aromatized. It needs to be in relationship with other qualities that give it breathing space, that give it place, that give it arichut apayim, that give it patience. And nachon, that's how he begins the teaching about tzedek u'mishpat. Ve'azai, nachon, and that is the hour, demitchabram dachar v'nukva. Tzedek u'mishpat mechon kiso is the great moment of harmony, where the masculine and feminine come together, kutsh abrichu shchinte, it's all coming together, and the worlds are in joy and rachamim. But when the world is in a mess, like it is now, for example, and everything's being defiled, everything and all the tmidim have been annulled and nullified, the masculine turns away from the feminine. Okay? And I want to say something about that. And the great serpent awakens in the world. Woe, woe to the world at that time. And why does all this happen? Because the male has turned away from the female. So I want to say something about this. This is a very powerful kind of archetypal language of the Zohar to speak about the fact that the masculine has a tendency to transcend. It transcends, okay? The world is too messy, too bloody, too messed up. And when everything gets too messy here, right? We read it also in Yud Zayin Bet Tammuz, in the Agadot of Echaraba, God says, I'm getting out of here. Bye. Right? Like the Lorax. Bye. Klamar, I'm out of here. I'm not, nachon? He says, Ach b'shai enai mimeno, I'm going to, Eshiv achor yamino, those are the great, great images of the destruction. Where does destruction come about? When divinity chooses to transcend, to go into the merchakim, into the... And who's left here in the world? Okay, if we're talking theology, poor eminence. The immanent. The divinity as immanence, the divinity as present in our blood, in our flesh, in our desire, in our hopes, in our death, in our birth, in time, she stays in the world. She's the Shekhinah, she stays in the world. But the Zohar here says, when he turns away from her, when transcendence turns away from the immanent, when they are not looking at each other face to face, when there is no loving union between anything that you would like to call the masculine today, anything you would like to call archetypally the feminine. You know, that's up to like, where do we come from and which college did we go to? But I think what he's trying to say, in whatever way that we translate it, is that there is a danger when tzedek is left alone to deal with the world, because tzedek is not enough. Okay, so I want to read the way he says it. He says, when there isn't that connection between mishpat and tzedek, and I just want to say something about also the Hebrew and the general imagination that we have about the difference between tzedek and mishpat. Tzedek is blind. Tzedek is abstract in a certain way. Tzedek has to be blind, right? Because she meets out justice. Yadin, she is the din, she's the tzedek. She is that type of righteousness, that it's the exact right way to do it. Mishpat is connected more to the idea of the judge. There is a judge. There are the eyes of the judge, Einei Dayanim. There is a story, right? And to come up with real, harmonious anything, there has to be tzedek and mishpat. There has to be the personal, there has to be with the abstract, there has to be the immanent with the transcendent. There has to, all these things have to be together so that this world can proceed. Am I making sense, or is this totally ridiculous through jet lag? I don't know. but רגע, לא, אבל זה באמת, נכון, זהו, maybe we're overrating understanding. Like, we don't have to, אבל, it is important, it's really, I mean, first of all, I just remember the first time I read this, I was in shock, נכון? To say, wow, all my life, I've been trying to sweeten the Shekhinah so she won't be alone in this world, because the masculine God is left. We're not in a world of a masculine God. God has ascended to his mystical, to his transcendent heights after the Churban. That's according to our general traditions. He's not in history. He's not saving us. We're in exile. We have Shekhinah. We have Shekhinah in our world. But Rabbi Shimon says, but you can't just throw Shekhinah and ask her to take care of everything. She has to do the dishes and take care of the children and do justice and justly and righteously disseminate the food that every little squirrel. It's too much. And when that happens and the world is full of evil doing, she becomes wrathful. It's a very mythic image of her. She becomes very wrathful. And she's going to mete out, I think that's the word, mete out, yeah. She's going to wield her justice, her tzedek, in a very, very frightening, dangerous way, right? You can see her like it's a very powerful image of the Shekhinah, And therefore he says, if there is a person in the world that is willing to be in that role, not to be afraid of her, she is our beloved Shekhinah. She's showing you her powerful, wrathful face. Deal with it, love her. She's the beloved. And we need to save the world. So by what? By sweetening and aromatizing Shekhinah. It's a fascinating language. It doesn't say we have to change her attire, we have to make her be something else. No, because we need that tzedek. We need the tzedek in the world. But we need tzedek to feel beloved. We need to love her, we need to sing with her, we need to not be afraid of that aspect of the divine, and not just want chesed and rachamim. We have to know how to withstand din, and we also have to know how to withstand the fire of din kashe, of harsh judgment. And that's why he ends that by saying, which I think he translated so beautifully. I'll just read it. He says, when this tzedek is assuaged by mishpat, it is called tzedakah. That's the harmony. The harmony of the Middot is that it's not tzedek alone anymore. It's not mishpat alone anymore. It's the coming together creates that balance. And the balance is called tzedakah. And the world is sweetened by kindness. Kindness. We need so much of that now. Kindness. You know, my dear friend, Zichronah Livracha, Rabbi Lori Phillips, right? That's what she left before she died. She left for everybody that, be kind. In times that are really bad, we have to be kind. So he says here, the world is sweetened by kindness and filled with it, as it is written, tzedakah, again, the verse here, and then he says, I testify that all my days I have been distressed for this world, that it not encounter the judgment of tzedek and be consumed by her flames. As it is written, she eats and wipes her mouth and says, I was allowed to do this. I was allowed to be this harsh. And then he says, from here on, everyone in the mouth of the deep pit, and surely in this generations there are righteous ones, yet they are few who will rise to defend the flock from four directions. So I wanted to bring it, first of all, to say that this is the most outspoken kind of teaching in the Zohar that says you can't have one midah without the balance of the other. Yeah? They have to be in relationship, right? And don't think only about how different they are from each other, but what are they giving each other? What are they giving each other that creates something that's more sustainable than each one when they stand on their own? Okay? You need that rachamim in the mishpat to be with the tzedek, and then her flames subside. And then the fact that we have to deal and go through this great trial that we're all going through now as well can be with meaning, because it's not just burning us. It's not just crushing us. It's not, din can turn into something that is life-giving. And Rabbi Shimon says, in every generations there are going to be people that can do this, but there are very few. There are very few people that understand that this is the role. It is very interesting because tzedek is so beloved. And tzedek is so beloved by us. You know, even Muki in his song says, Kulam medabrim al shalom, af echad lo medaber al tzedek. We need to speak about tzedek. What are all the demonstrations that we're going to? A lot of them have to do with tzedek. We want tzedek. But I think it's a very interesting critique for us to be looking at. That it's saying, remember carrying your flame, me as well, carrying my flame, of all the injustices of what's happening in our society, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank, what's happening with occupation. אפשר למות. כלומר, from the point of view of why we need to raise up tzedek. What's happening in our society? What's happening between Jews? But to say, remember that when you're carrying that, you have to keep in our consciousness, what are the other qualities that balance the tzedek, that can make it sustainable. So, kol hakavod leRabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, I take my hat off. I think it's a great teaching. It's an amazing teaching. So that's what I wanted to bring from the Idra Zuta. The Idra Zuta is an amazing text. It's very long. It's very wonderful. But I think at the heart of it is the willingness to say, I go with her. I'm with her in that state. And I will bring that sweetness. It's very devotional. It's very, he's dying into her. So it's like, it's an amazing text. Rega, I'll stop for a moment. That's pretty intense. Yeah. The serpent in the world of the Zohar is the force of evil. Evil is seen as a real force. It's a real powerful force in reality. And when things go out of balance, it immediately raises its head because it has a place to play around in. It's sleek, smart, slippery. It will come in wherever there is a vacuum. And if we're not keeping things in balance, and if the masculine and feminine, think of it, I'm just thinking of it in the world of war. In the world of war, the first thing that gets trashed is the feminine, out through the window. Klamar, this is the time of the boy, this is the time of fighting, this is the time. It's very interesting. What happens, Bichlal? What happens to the qualities of the feminine? Are they brought together? Where are they meeting? Where are they getting a voice, Bichlal? Where are they getting a voice that is speaking to each other? I'm putting that out there. I would ask that also about, the American world, the Jewish American world. Like, Nachon, he's saying we have to balance this. And now, I want to say something about Rabbi Nachman. This is going to be a much easier part. So if לא באמת, חברים, I'm not saying, I don't think that Idra is simple stuff. Idra is not simple stuff, but so what? So is Bach. Ma. We can't just do baby Judaism, we have to do interesting stuff. Interesting stuff is complicated. Ken. Ken, נחש, בטח. טוב, look, I'm not... כן, אבל פה, רגע, I'll just say something in general, because I don't want to do this a class about evil. That's a whole, we can do a whole summer on that. Very important in our day. No, we have enough of it. But Natalie is saying, but what is it? Who is this snake, and what is the role of the snake? I'll just say it in a moment. I just want to say it in the short version, but I want to say that what is very unique to the Kabbalistic worldview vis-a-vis the philosophical worldview in the Middle Ages is that the philosophers say that evil does not exist. That's the big difference between Kabbalists and philosophers. The philosophers say evil and darkness do not exist. They are only the absence of light is darkness. The absence of good is evil. Not in Kabbalah. Not in Kabbalah at all. There is a force, it's a dynamic force in reality. It is evil. Its power is anti-cosmic. It wants to break apart structures. It's not the trickster. It's much more dangerous in many ways. But it's a power that disrupts. Okay? Nirgan mafrid aluf. It takes whatever is in unity and it wants to break it apart from the primordial myth of the garden, right? It's what breaks up the unity of the story. On the one hand, without the snake, there wouldn't be a story, there wouldn't be a world, everything would be static and we'd all be bored in the Garden of Eden. But the snake is a real power. And it's a power that you have to know how to deal with. But tzedek is not evil. Tzedek is sacred. But when tzedek becomes overinflamed, when she becomes so angry for good reasons, even for good reasons, right? It becomes very dangerous. It becomes very dangerous. It has to... Actually, it's very interesting that they see it also in this domestic kind of language where the lover and the beloved, the husband and wife have to, there has to be sweetness. There has to be a sweetening so that, and I wrote something that I loved, which is the way Cordovero understood this story in the 16th century. But it is a fascinating thing to say. Our role is to create the balance. Our role is to bring in the sweetness. We have to bring in an aroma so that what we're bringing is not only scorching you and you cannot swallow it. Actually, that's the job of rabbis. Part of the job is making it, making our understanding of the world go down, right? And it's sometimes with a spoonful of sugar, sometimes it's with other things, but there's something that is brought about here that says you have to have the people in each generation that can, withstand the fire and bring the fire in a way that it doesn't destroy us, okay? And that justice doesn't, or righteousness doesn't destroy us. Rabbi Nachman, in this very famous story, which he told one day when he saw his chazan, or a chazan, walking around with a torn coat, and he says, hey guy, hey brother, look at this is the way you dress for tefillah. And then he said, oh, this reminds me of a story. And because he was a genius artist, he just started talking and didn't stop. And he told the whole story of the Master of Prayer. Okay, and we studied it once for 4 days. It was delicious. It's an amazing story. But what I want to bring from it for us is the fact that it speaks about the primordial unity that lies at the source of us, of the source of everything, that in all of us, whether we had a terrible childhood or a wonderful childhood, we carry in our subconsciousness, we carry in the collective subconsciousness an image of harmony, of a primordial unity. Unity, right? Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen and a princess. She had a beautiful, valorous warrior husband. They had a beautiful child. The child had golden hair, right? And that king was wise. He had a melit, he had an orator that could speak beautifully. He had the warrior, he had the master of prayer, right? He had the person who's in charge of the treasury. He had the beloved friend. All of them were in one unity, right? And in that world of unity, every quality, all the king's men, right? They would go and get their strength from the source so that they could bring it to the well-being of that unity. But, and that's the big thing of Rabbi Nachman says, that unity is bound to break. In our world, that unity, that primordial, archaic unity has to break for us to become Bechlal who we are. But when it breaks, it's a huge, huge tragedy also, right? The great storm comes, it snatches the baby, the princess runs after the baby, the mother runs after the princess, the king runs after his queen, everybody gets dispersed, and the waters turn into dry land, the dry land turns into water, the things that were up are now down, just, unbelievable description that he has, that the world has gone through a great, great storm. And when there is a great storm, the paths of the old days are not going to work. He says, the paths that we used before, that we knew how to navigate, how to get from place to place, are not going to work anymore. We can't use them. So what happens in the story, and I think this is the very humoristic and wild imagination of Rabbi Nachman, he says that after the storm, all the people were dispersed in the world, right? Think of like Migdal Bavel. Everybody's all over the place, and people are getting together, and they're asking the right question. Let's create a community. Let's create a country. What are we going to base our country on? What's going to be the value that is going to bring us all together? And what do they say? That's where Rabbi Nachman really catches the whole farce of it. He says, what happens when you choose one quality is that it's going to become obscene. It's going to become ridiculous, right? So, for example, he gives a very beautiful, he says, there was one group that said, the purpose of the world is joy. So what are we going to do? Who are we going to put as a king above us? Who's going to... So they go and they find a drunk French guy. I think it's Napoleon. It's a joke. They find a drunkard French person, and they make him king because they see him happy. So they take the drunkard. And there's a country, there's the group of people that say, no. The world is about... We're looking at the world and we're observing that the world, think of the Buddha, he also noticed that, everything in this reality comes apart and disintegrates. Look at our world. So that means that that is the law of reality. The law of reality is the disintegration of structure, right? So we have to find as a king a person who will bring about that disintegration quicker than other people. So they find a murderer, and they make them right. That's already the farce. He's making a joke and then there's a country of the people that think that the most important thing, reminds me of a few countries, is wellness. Wellness, the wellness of body, the wellness of what we eat, the fine organic things that and they choose this guy who's very aware of his body, right? And they put him as a king. The other, there's another sect that decides that wisdom, yeah? They also, what are they going to do? They find a person that's a philosopher from this place that they find on the road. There's a group that thinks that it's about procreation. They find a beautiful woman, and she stands there and she creates desire. It is very funny. Okay? But after it's funny, it's very sad. Because what do we realize? We realize that the question was a good question. People are not evil. When we're lost and we're trying to navigate the great waves of not knowing and not having enough clarity, it's a big mistake to choose one quality and say that's what we're going to do. It's going to be only tzedek. It's going to be only bitachon. It's going to be... Because when you do that, that's what happens. Then the fallacies of the way you go about trying to understand what will a community that is built on one thing, on chadness, only one thing. And of course, the land that is most problematic is the country that says the most important thing in the world is money. Because money makes the world go round, right? And they are the ones that fall into the deepest delusional world, which actually sounds like a total take on America. But he's describing late capitalism in many ways, but he describes a country where money is the only quality, and therefore, if you have a lot of money, then you are not just a regular human, you become a star. And if you have more money, you are an angel. And if you have more money, you become a goddess. And if you have less money, you're a dog, or you might be a creepy crawly, right? And the Baal Tfilah finds out about this country, and he says, this is the most difficult country to kind of rectify. But I don't want to talk about that. That's the story of the Master of Prayer. What I want to just put down here is the idea of what happens when each country goes into this seclusionist, one-quality reality, not understanding that the orator has to be in relationship with the lover, and the lover has to be with the warrior, and the warrior has to be with a wise counselor, and you can't have them without the treasurer, without the person who's paying attention to the money and to the budget. No, it's not that we're going to take all those out and say, no, now is a very emergency time, we're going to zero in on one quality, because this is what's going to happen. And then at the end of the story is how they go about and try and teach all these places that, chevre, you've fallen into a great mistake. You have to be in that relationality. So I ask you to enjoy reading Rabbi Nachman. You have many translations. You have it all online in English. It's one of the great sacred stories of Rabbi Nachman. It's one of the 13 sacred Masiyot. When he felt, and by the way, that was also an Et Lasot Ladonai of Rabbi Nachman. That when Rabbi Nachman decided 4 years before he died to say, in the beginning of the 19th century, to say, regular Torah is not going to work now. Torah lo chaviva al Israel. It's not waking people up. People are asleep. People's consciousness is fast asleep. The remedy is going to be to go back to storytelling, to go back to stories, and not just stories, to go to the stories that come from the source, to the archaic, archetypal stories about kings and queens and paupers and rich men. That's the way I'm going to give Torah. That's the way I'm going to wake people up to the spiritual now, because that is a state that the world is in. And he does something amazing for a person of Torah, that instead of continuing and doing his elaborate, amazing Torot, he starts telling stories. And the stories have been, we've inherited these amazing stories that are totally genius, especially if you know how to look into also the underpinnings, like, wow, how did he do this? How did he get to this? And that's very, very, very fascinating. So I want to end with two texts that are about our need to work together, the Middot. And just before I do that, I'd like you each to take your pen and write to yourself, we're not sharing this, what is the quality that you are ODing on, that you're overdosing on? What is the quality? I'm talking about a good quality, a divine quality, a midah in your personality, in the way you understand the world, in the way you would like to understand God. What is the midah that you are overly connected to? Okay? Just write it down to yourself. Just write it down to yourself. But you have to be truthful. And now just put next to it somewhere as an invitation from yourself to yourself. What would be a midah that you are curious about understanding more? Okay, what is a midah that you would like to bring into your language, your imagination, your theology, your God language, your prayer, your relationships? What is a midah that's standing now on the side, maybe bashful or disregarded, that you feel needs to be? Well, it's good in preparation for the high holidays anyway. No, I never forget that I'm sitting with rabbis. Make no mistake. So I want to bring the last two texts that I chose for our. One is the teaching, which is a very radical teaching of the Zohar on the sin of the Garden of Eden. And the sin, according to the Zohar, is very, very different from the pshat of the Torah, right? In the pshat of the Torah, but the Zohar never stays only with the pshat, it always goes beyond the pshat. But the verse says, Mikol, in the pshat of the Torah, right, God says you're not allowed to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then the snake entices us, and we eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then we're thrown out, right? That's the story. But look at the close reading that the Zohar does. And this only artists can do. But the verse that God says to humanity, to Adam and Chava, he says, Mikol etz hagan achol tochel. And the way the Zohar reads it is that this was the commandment. You must eat of all the different trees of the divine garden. That is the commandment. Mikol etz hagan achol tochel. This is why we have been placed in the Garden of Eden, in the garden of God, to taste all the tree of friendship and the tree of life and the tree of wisdom. All that you can just imagine. You can do the children's books about all the trees that grew up in that garden. But the Zohar reads very good pshat here. Mikol etz hagan achol tochel. Umi etz hadat tov v'ra. But from the tree of binary thinking, tov v'ra, asur mutar, right? That tree of discursive mind, of analytical, right? Which we need very much. By the way, very sacred. It's a very sacred tree. But from that tree, lo tochal mimenu levado, right? That's what the Zohar understands. You are not allowed to eat from one tree. Because we have been put in the garden to eat of all the different qualities of the divine in the world. We have to make the balance of that beautiful fruit salad. But humanity chose. Each tree, by the way, is also a mode of perception. It's also a level of reality. It's also a level of consciousness. But humanity chose this one. That's how you develop technology. That's how you develop science. That's how you develop language. It's a very, very, very important mode of perceiving. But the Zohar says, look, you can't say that it's bad, etz hadat tov v'ra. Look, Abraham ate from it. He knows how to discern between good and evil. Isaac, Jacob, they all ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We wouldn't be here today. There would be no difference between me and you if we didn't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? We differentiate. But if you eat from that mode of that way of understanding the world and ourselves only, it will be our death. It will bring about destruction. So that's the great, maybe that's, when Danny Matt wrote the translation, he has the biggest footnote in all of the 12 volumes is about this, because it's so radical a teaching on the one hand, and it's so attentive to the text on the other hand, to say, why were we put in the garden after God made so many beautiful trees grow there? Nachon? Vayita Adonai Elohim kol etz ma, right? All the trees, and we chose one. Nachon? So I want to bring that, and I want to end by a Zohar that is not studied much. It's in the Parasha of Ki Tisa. And after the chevraya, after they go about and have all their adventures and learn all these things about the golden calf and about the punishment and about all kinds of things, as in many of the Zoharic stories, they come together to their teacher. And why do they come to the teacher? They come to the teacher to make sense. Like, this is what happened to us on Mulberry Street. Can somebody tell us, this is what happened to us. All these wondrous things happen to us, but we don't understand everything. And that's why they come to the master. And the master, the role of the great teacher, is to take the perspective that they have and kind of widen it. And here, the idea of balancing the Middot turns from being a theological reflection into a prescriptive request that he has of us or of his students. So I want to read it. I'll read it in Hebrew and I'll read some of it in English. באו לפני רבי שמעון, ראה בפניהם סימן, אמר, היכנסו, אולו, היכנסו בנים קדושים, היכנסו אהובי המלך, היכנסו אהובים שלי, היכנסו, meine teure, right? He's calling them, who love each other, אהובים אלה לאלה. שאמר רבי אבא, for we have a teaching from Rabbi Abba, who's the most senior disciple of the Chevraya and the Zohar. And I'll read it now in English. All those companions who do not love another depart from the world before their time, which is, of course, quoting what happened to the students of Rabbi Akiva, right? That we have the story in the Gemara, that 24,000 students died because they did not love each other. They did not honor each other. All the companions in the days of Rabbi Shimon loved one another in soul and spirit, and therefore the generation of Rabbi Shimon was unconcealed. And unconcealed, the Itgalia here means that the generation of the Zohar is a generation that when there is love, right, and there is trust, we can reveal more of who we are. When there is distrust, there is concealment. When there is fear, there is even more concealment, right? But in the generation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, right, this is what it says in the Zohar, a person would say to their friends, don't beat around the bush. Ptach picha v'ya'iru dvarecha. Just open your mouth and say to me what you want to say to me. Right? It's clear, it's unconcealed. It's a very fascinating thing to say in a world where the relationship between language and reality is in a total crisis. We are in a total crisis. Language doesn't mean anything. The relationship between reality and language and media is crazy at the moment. Like, how will we ever be able to rectify that is going to be a huge thing. But I want to continue the reading. For Rabbi Shimon used to say, all companions who do not love each other divert themselves from the straight path. And moreover, they create a pagam in the Shekhinah. They cut her, they separate her from all the unity of the other sfirot. For Torah I love this. For Torah entails love, brotherhood, sisterhood, I would say, and truth. Abraham loves Isaac. Chesed loves Din, right? Isaac loves Abraham. Din loves Chesed. The qualities have to love each other. They embrace one another. Abraham stands for Chesed. Isaac stands for stern judgment. They love each other. They have to find a way that they also embrace. And both are linked with Jacob in love and brotherhood, right? Because Jacob is Tiferet, is the quality that integrates the Chesed and the Din, offering him their spirit, each of them. Companions, that's why I love this. He then turns to the Chevraya and says, companions must follow that paradigm so as not to produce a defect or a breaking or a breakage. So there it is. That's the great teaching of the Itkalilut, where the teacher manages to speak in different ways to the disciples, saying, our role is to create all the time a higher and higher level of integration between the qualities. It doesn't mean that we don't have discernment. It doesn't mean that we don't have our choice of what we love. It doesn't mean that we don't have the qualities that we're going to fight for. But it means that we have to hold a larger picture, because integration is going to be made by all the trees of the garden that are very different from each other. And only that can bring what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai will call peace. Peace, right? That concordia, that state where different things are with each other without blowing up, without destroying each other. That is the great peace. That is the holding together of the Middot. So I'm very happy that I could bring some of that. Sorry that it was very esoteric, but I like esoteric stuff.